ahead, I think I will kind of pull a spike. This brings me back. I used to do stand-up comedy when you were allowed to do stand-up comedy, and this is how we would do it. You take the mic, you walk around the crowd, you make fun of everybody. I won't do that part. The last part, I won't make fun of you, except Michelle. Quit being so productive back there. How dare you? Nationals on the phone, you need to be less productive. All right, so I wanted to dedicate my talk today kind of on where I've come along here on the Libertarian Party journey, on where the Libertarian Party of Ohio has come from and where we are now. Just because, there's some lifers in here, Don Kissick and I, we go all the way back to 2010. And I always kind of talk about 2010 was this magical heyday, right? So someone asked, kind of in the Q&A portion, under their breath while I was at the other table, what was it like before SB 193? What was it like before we had ballot access benchmarks that we had to hit? Because before 2010, before SB 193, that was until 2013, when I first joined the party, I ran for mayor of my hometown, Bexley, in 2007. I was endorsed by the Franklin County Libertarian Party, which was run by Mark Noble, which is another lifer right there, everybody. Thanks for being here, Mark. So I had a meeting with Mark and a couple other fellows who I think have moved out of state now. I think Jeremiah Arn, there's a couple others. John Stewart, of course, is still around. That's who I met with first in 2007 just to get the endorsement in a nonpartisan race. And then by 2009, I actually became a paying member of the Libertarian Party. $25, even I could afford that in 2009. So that's when I officially joined. And in 2010, I just want to lay it all out for everyone who doesn't remember. In 2010, there was no ballot access restrictions. There was only regulations within the Secretary of State's office for how a political party became a political party.
Directives. It was the Secretary of State directives.
The directives, yes. And anytime the Secretary of State, which was Ken Blackwell up until 2006, he was a Republican. You may remember him for rigging all the voting machines in 2004. He was really good at it. He was very good at it. What they would do, the Republicans obviously would always try to do, is make it a little bit harder and a little bit harder to make a political party possible within the Secretary of State's structure, right? So the Libertarian Party of Ohio always sued, and they always won. We always won up until 2006, and then that was it. That was the precedent for getting a third party, a minor party ballot access up until SB 193 in 2013. So that was the playing field, a nice even playing field. Imagine that, where the goalposts don't move and you're not out there with a bat when you think you're playing hockey. It was very nice. It was very nice to have that. And so in 2010, the Libertarian Party of Ohio seized on that. There was a big Tea Party movement. There was a post-Ron Paul push, right? I got into libertarianism because of Ron Paul, right? Hey, let's go ahead. Did somebody clap or did someone boo? I can never tell. We screwed Ron Paul. Ron Paul was an anti-war Republican, blew my mind in May 2007. That's what kind of gave me the courage to step up, run for office in my hometown of Bexley in 2007. Got 5% in that race against 7 other people, and then got inspired to look into running for Congress, because when you lose one small race, why not go bigger? Never should be the advice, but nonetheless, that's what we did. So in 2009, that's when I joined the Libertarian Party of Ohio, joined the Libertarian Party National, and dedicated myself to the L name and the L brand when we were on the ballot. So 2010, we had state rep candidates all over the state. Some of them getting 19%. A fellow down there in Hocking County, his name was Chad something. I've never seen him since, but he did very well. And so we had multiple state rep candidates, multiple state senate candidates. I remember in my home district of Bexley, Lawrence Binsky was a guy who ran as a Libertarian candidate. And of course, we had a full slate of statewide candidates. We had Ken Mastez as our gubernatorial candidate, a fellow named Mark Allen Feldman, rest in peace, is our Attorney General candidate. Absolutely. He's that Libertarian. I'm not going to recreate his rap. It's too hard. I can't. I've been encouraged not to rap anymore, actually, believe it or not. But we had every single statewide race we had covered. I think we even had a Senate candidate that year, if it was a Senate race, Senate election year. So that was 2010, and what happened in 2010 was we had Ted Strickland, we had a Democratic basically the Democrats were in charge of every statewide office except for auditor. That was a lady named Mary Taylor. She became John Kasich's lieutenant governor candidate, and Kasich and the Republicans swept the statewide races in 2010, right? Now, that was the first hint at trouble to come, right? That the Republicans barely squeaked into their offices. And I believe Kasich won by less than 2%, and Ken Mast as our candidate, his vote get was about 2% in 2010. So moving forward, we continue to build on this huge momentum, these huge results in 2010, having state rep races where we got 19, 17%. We were actually, the Libertarians were here to play. And shout out to leadership at that time. Kevin Nedler, I always call him Papa Bear. He was a fella who kind of came and brought a lot of the corporate structure. Some of the things we still have in place, some of the things we don't, that's okay, people come and go. I thought Kevin was a very good chairman for 2010 and continued to build us into 2012. In 2012, some of you may remember, candidate Gary Johnson, his vice presidential candidate, Judge Jim Gray. Ohio was one of their favorite states to come and campaign, so much so that even with the national campaign and its limited resources, Gary Johnson came to Ohio twice, and probably even more than that. He was in Columbus for multiple fairs that we had there. In Cincinnati, we had a rally with about 400, 500 people. That was really cool. And then we had an even bigger one in outside of Cleveland. And we had some folks there. Debbie Dean was our Gary Johnson contact up in Northeast Ohio, and a fellow named Brad Lowry was in charge of the Cincinnati Southwest operations. And they put together some great rallies. And again, Gary Johnson came to Ohio. This is like this is the most put together, Libertarian Party state affiliate in the country. So that was us in 2010, 2012, right? So 2012, I think Gary Johnson, I don't know, he probably just got 1% here, let's face it. That's how it went. But that, again, we were able to build on that for 2014. Oh, but this is where it gets spicy, everyone. Yeah. For anyone who doesn't remember, this is what ended up happening. So we are crushing it. The Libertarian Party of Ohio is crushing it. Coming out of 2012, we're on National's radar. Kevin Nedler's moving up. Even they gave me this award for running for Congress. It's the Patrick Henry Award. They gave it to two people for their 2010 races. It's for outstanding candidates. One of the guys I think actually won and did really well. I just made a bunch of smart-ass videos talking about how we got to give the two-party system the third finger. It got on PBS, it got on CNN, and they gave me this award. So that was really cool. With the awards system, that was a Kevin Nedler idea. So Kevin Nedler's moving up at National. National's recognizing what Ohio is doing. And in 2014, we are fully ready to shoot up another full slate of statewide candidates for the Ohio voters to choose from. But the Republicans, the Ohio Republican Party, folks, they did not like that. And especially John Kasich, who had aspirations to run for president. After 2014, he wanted to win so overwhelmingly that he could take those numbers triumphantly into a 2016 presidential primary with the Republicans. Of course, we all saw how that went, so I won't, actually, here, I did create this t-shirt. I'll talk about my t-shirt later. All right, let's go ahead and get through the nitty-gritty. 2013, up until this point, again, only Secretary of State directives determine whether a political party can be a political party or not. Therefore, a legislator named Representative Bill Seitz, boo, comes along in the Senate. He was the Senate. Yeah, he's one of those fellows that jumps back and forth between the state Senate and the state House. So he was in the state Senate, and the Republicans put together something to address the crisis, the Libertarian Party of Ohio crisis, right? The Wild West, they called it. It was absolutely unruly. It was no rules how these minor political parties could just pop up. Well, so they wanted to put a stop to it. So they created SB 193. And what it did, it created basically regulations, benchmarks, what have you, restrictions, I think, more accurately. And it changed the ballot access requirements to where we are now. A minor party needs to petition up to 1% of the total last vote in the previous election. Meaning, so for 2018, for example, we had to get over 1% of 5 million votes, so we had to hit the 55,000 signature benchmark. And of course, you got to get double that, and sometimes even triple, just to be sure, because they're always going through and scratching off as many names as they can. So They got, I believe it was 1% to even become a political party, and then after that, to keep your ballot access for 4 years, you had to get 3% in the governor's race or the presidential race. Now that is very key. Again, why 3%? Because up until that point, in 2013, this is 2013 when SB 193 was created, up until that point, no third party had gotten over 2%, or no, they got over 2%, but they never gotten over 3%. And then also, presidential and governor races means that parties like us, where we actually can run someone, like in 2010, we ran a qualified gentleman named Matthew, what's the fellow's name? Matt Cantrell for state treasurer. He ran against Kevin Boyce, who's a Democrat and unqualified, and a fellow named Josh Mantel, a Republican, who's also uniquely unqualified for anything, really. And specifically state treasurer. And Matt Cantrell was an actual CPA. He was actually certified, and he actually got endorsed by the Cleveland Plain Dealer because, again, sometimes when you get 3 people in a room and 2 of them are assholes and one of them's just a nice guy who's very qualified, the folks in Cleveland tend to recognize that maybe the third guy's a lot better than we're giving credit for. So Matt Cantrell actually got endorsed for state treasurer in 2010. So that's where, the Libertarians, we can shine at races like that. I mean, in 2018, we ran Bob Coogan for auditor. He's actually an auditor. Imagine that. Whoa, what a concept. My God. So that's why SB 193 limited the races to president and governor, because they knew those were big, hard races to focus on. That's where they get most of their money into their races as well, right? No dark money super PAC is throwing millions of dollars at an auditor race, right? It's governor and president. Those are the big ones, and of course Senate. So that's why Bill Sykes, that's why they wrote the bill that way. And of course the Republican supermajority that was being built, right? So after 2010, keep in mind, redistricting happened, and the Republicans were now in charge of all of it. And this is how we have this disgusting, ridiculous supermajority of Republicans in the State House now. In the State Senate, where they hold a 23 to 11, 20, I don't know, it's 22 to 11 supermajority in the Senate, and some 60-some seats to 30-some seats in the House of Representatives. So this is the General Assembly. So that's what the Republicans had after 2010. They fortified those districts in 2012, and so in 2013 they felt compelled to do whatever they wanted. SB 193 was passed with emergency clause, remember that? And it was signed that night by John Kasich. So the Libertarian Party of Ohio did what we always do. We sued, and we went to court, and we won partially. The legislation was still approved, but the emergency provisions were no longer allowed. The emergency provisions were not going to be allowed for the 2014 election, specifically because at that point, the Libertarian Party of Ohio, and I remember opening for him up in Wood County, where he crushed a fellow named Charlie Earl. Charlie Earl, everybody. Let's hear it for Charlie. Charlie, we miss you. He's up in Toledo, he's fine. He's just very old now. He's a good fella. Charlie Earl, man, that guy, when I was campaigning with Charlie Earl in 2010, that guy could walk into any room of hillbillies, hicks, and rednecks and just murder. He would just crush. He was such a good speaker. And I remember, I knew that I had it. I knew I had what it took to run for office when I walked outside after crushing some ridiculous, candidate forum in Delaware of some kind. And I go outside, Charlie was smoking a cigarette. He's like, not bad for a rookie. I was like, pleased to meet you, Charlie. So 2013, I was the opener for Charlie Earl. We basically started rolling out his campaign in county by county. Man, Charlie Earl would just whip up a crowd, and the checkbooks would come out, and people were writing checks because they did not like John Kasich. Multiple reasons not to like John Kasich, but specifically, I believe at that time, he had done the Medicaid, Medicare workaround, where he bypassed the state legislature, and Republicans, Tea Party folks were understandably very upset about it. In addition to many other things, John Kasich's just a raging asshole. So, I'll say, you heard it here first, folks. All right. I also have more to say about John Kasich, but I'll give you some. I'll save it for later. All right. So 2013, the reason they passed this with emergency provisions again was to protect John Kasich. We call it the John Kasich Re-Election Protection Act. That was a term coined by Aaron Harris. We made a video. I remember I got paid $50 to make the video. I was very excited. And, we just laid out our case. This is what they're trying to do. It's pretty blatant, right? So we did win in court on the emergency provisions. The emergency provisions would not apply to the 2014 race because at that point candidates minor party candidates, Charlie Earl specifically, had already started campaigning, and it was not fair to just remove them from the ballot on these ridiculous new regulations created by SB 193. So SB 193 would then go into effect from the results of the 2014 race and then carry forward from there. Well, okay then, Libertarians, we see what you've done. You've beat us at our own game. Sure will be hard for you to get 3% of the vote in the governor's race if you don't have a gubernatorial candidate. This enters into the world Matt Borges. Boo, hiss. My God, he looks like they shoved sausage into his soup. He's so disgusting. Matt Borges, if you don't know, is the former Ohio Republican Party chairman. He was Republican Party chairman at that time. He's a Kasich loyalist, and he was put in place to protect Kasich's interests within the Ohio Republican Party because, again, Kasich was very unpopular within his own party. So Matt Borges goes into action, and what they do is, I believe the Ohio Supreme Court, they found a guileless dupe who was registered as a Libertarian, and this registered Libertarian challenged Charlie Earl's signatures. So it's a Libertarian challenging Libertarian signatures, which is the letter of the law, how you have to do it. He challenges the signatures in court because at that time I believe we had some paid petitioners getting some signatures for Charlie Earl. They did not sign properly. This was a complete arbitrary paperwork complaint, basically, that had never been enforced before. But John Husted, who is now our Lieutenant Governor, was then Secretary of State. That's who Charlie ran against in 2010. And of course, John Husted, he got so berated by Charlie Earl. Charlie Earl really read John Husted the Riot Act in some of those debates in 2010. So John Husted probably is seeing this Charlie Earl guy and is like, yeah, challenge those signatures. The challenge goes through. It then has to go to court. We find out through the proceedings that the Ohio Republican Party is paying for the entire lawsuit, a $200,000 lawsuit. It's not just Matt Borges, it's a fellow named Terry Casey, who's another John Kasich loyalist. I have no idea if he's dead yet or if he's still alive, but you know.
Who cares?
Who cares, exactly. I just always wonder if he's dead or not, you know. He's very old at that time. So Terry Casey, Matt Borges, they're the ones who basically put together this challenge of Charlie Earl's signatures, and the challenge ends up being successful. Charlie Earl is removed from the ballot on this technicality that has never been enforced before. And now the Libertarian Party of Ohio is without a gubernatorial candidate. They were also very nervous, I believe, about Attorney General. We had Stephen Linneberry running against Mike DeWine. We also had Aaron Harris running for Secretary of State. No, Kevin Neller was running for Secretary of State. And of course, Bob Bridges was running for auditor. They allowed some of those guys to stay in the statewide races, but the governor's race, they really wanted to make sure it was impossible for us to get 3% without a gubernatorial candidate. So that is where we were after 2014. Quick fun thing, so after Charlie was kicked off the ballot, that's when I started a statewide political action committee called Central Ohioans Countering Kasich, and we made these cool t-shirts, everyone. If you don't know, Central Ohioans Countering Kasich, C-O-C-K, Cock Pack is what we call it. It was an anti-John Kasich pack that eventually the Democrat in that race, a guy named Ed Fitzgerald, did so poorly as a Democratic candidate that we were actually getting more statewide press than Ed Fitzgerald. Because every time John Kasich would release one of his ridiculous, I'm a uniter ads, we would just make fun of him with John K. Sucks. Check that out, Cock Pack on YouTube. Don't just Google Cock Packs. You won't find what you're looking for. Just go to YouTube. Just go to YouTube. Or you might find what you're looking for. Oh, yeah.
Or if you do, don't use Google.
Absolutely. Use Bing or something. I don't know if that's still a thing. Is Bing a thing? I don't know. So that's all on YouTube. You know, again, when in doubt, just make fun of the Republicans. They're way bigger snowflakes than they let on. I'll get to more of that later. So 2014, that's where we were. And we lost ballot access. Now we had new rules. We had new regulations. Some of the most restrictive in the entire country. As we all know, Libertarian parties, especially at the national level, we have several experts on ballot access. And we are easily one of the most restrictive states on ballot access. In fact, our state restricted ballot access so well that other states began to model theirs. Now New York is extremely restrictive. It used to be 50,000. Larry Sharp hit that mark in 2018 for ballot access for the Libertarians in New York. What do? It's now 130,000 votes in the governor's race, and so on and so on. This is what they do. Bipartisanship, I'll tell you where they're bipartisan, and keeping other voices off of the ballot. So this is why we gotta join together and stay together and continue the course. Because after 2014, 2016 came around, The only thing we could do was get Gary Johnson on the ballot as an independent. We did try to do some fun Supreme Court rigmarole, right? I think it's only 5,000 signatures to get on the ballot as an independent for president in the state of Ohio, which is pretty crazy. It's less restrictive to get on the ballot as an independent than if you actually have a party affiliation like an L or a G next to your name. And they did that by design, and they did that on purpose, which is why, again, playing by their rules for next year, running people for local races, nonpartisan races, people who want to run for state rep as an independent, run for county commissioner as an independent. It's not a bad idea, because again, you can offer your viewpoints, and you can even finagle with them on a local level if you want. Maybe recycling is a good thing where you're from. Maybe it's a slippery slope to fascism. I don't know. So 2014 leads to 2016. Gary Johnson and, of course, Bill Weld are on the ballot as independents. It's the best we could do. And they did hit the 3% benchmark. They did actually do that because Donald Trump was very unpopular. Hillary Clinton was also very unpopular. Both of them very uniquely unqualified. Bill Weld and Gary Johnson, between them, had 16 years of executive branch experience compared with, 6 with Hillary Clinton, and she was just Secretary of State. That's not a real thing. So we actually ran a good ticket. Again, the Libertarian Party, talk about staying on course even when the winds are blowing against us. That's what we did, and we did try the Supreme Court rigmarole. We took our 3% and went to the courts and said, look, there is Libertarians on 48 other states. Please count their results towards our ballot access. And of course, the Republican judge said, nope. And then we had to pick up the pieces and move on, leading to 2018. Now, I have a lot of feelings about 2018 because I don't know if you heard, I was very involved with the entire thing. I was on the ground getting signatures. So 2018, we had to get the 55,000 signatures. Again, 1% of the total votes cast in the previous election, 5 million votes cast, we had to get 55,000 signatures to get our ballot access back. We got double that. I think we even got triple almost. It was a $200,000 process for the paid petitioners, for the volunteers, for everything. And yet, by July 2018, we had the signatures and we were approved again on my birthday, 2018. August 2018, the Libertarian Party of Ohio is back on the ballot, ladies and gentlemen. That's fine, don't applaud because we all know what happens after that. Because at that point, we only have 3 months to put together an entire statewide gubernatorial campaign. And at that point, our resources are so stretched, they're so thin. Our best volunteers are not just trying to help my race, but they're also trying to run for office in their own places. When Chrissy was running for state rep, Dustin Dan was running for Secretary of State. We're already stretched so thin, and then our key race, we weren't able to do what we had to do, which was get the 3%. Now again, up until this point, I'd gotten 5% for mayor, I got 4% for Congress. The other 2 guys I was running against for the nomination for the gubernatorial nod, was the 18-year-old kid, was that Stephen Quinn? He still hates me. Is he like under the table here, like blogging right now? I'm just never sure. And there's a fellow named Bruce James, which I don't think I'll ever see Bruce James ever again, but that's okay, that happens. So I got the nomination over those 2 fellows. For my lieutenant governor pick, I chose Todd Grayson. He's a great guy out of Wood County. He was on city council across the river from Toledo. Perrysburg, thank you, yeah. And Todd was very sweet. We wanted to make sure we had some elected, even locally, I needed a Bill Weld to make Gary Johnson. I'm the wacky rock climber, and then, somebody should balance me out. Maybe not Bill Weld, but So that's why we chose Todd. And again, I will always be very, very proud of the campaign that we ran with what we had, with the time we had in 2018. I don't think, hindsight's 2020, sometimes hindsight's 2018. And so we were looking back, and you look at the numbers, and Ken Molman obviously is here, and he's more of a data guy, but when it comes to cost per vote, we had $30,000, we got 80,000 votes. That's fantastic. Again, talking about a blueprint for the future, you get a little more money, in theory, we will be getting more and more votes, right? So that is how that went down. Again, we got 1.8% of the popular vote in the state of Ohio. That was almost 80,000 votes, 15 votes shy. It's a stadium full of people. And again, Mike DeWine, very unpopular already within the Republican Party at that time. You know, we try to make the case to these Tea Party folks is like, even if you hate my guts, you think my glasses are stupid, still vote for me, because you're not just voting for a person, you're voting for an entire political party. And so that's the case that we try to make in 2018. And we fell short, and no one took that more seriously or harder than I did. And I was on a bender for weeks after that. You can ask my parents. They just found me in the basement all the time. Thank you, you get the joke. Everyone thinks Libertarians live with their parents, and some of us have to. All right. So that is how 2018 finished. Now, of course, again, thank you. Another rigmarole and a fine print. The Libertarians, thankfully, were afforded a second chance, right, in 2020 to hit that 3%. And that is why I was really hoping we could run a candidate nationally that could get us to the 3%. We obviously fell a little short there as well. So it was a big rigmarole to make sure, right? I believe that I think we had a candidate running for city council in Reynoldsburg in 2019 as a Libertarian, which is what ended up making the Secretary of State having to acknowledge that we did have party affiliation. We still had ballot access, right? Michelle, am I getting my facts right? Yes, okay, right. So once we made sure we had that certification, even from a local, Board of Elections, which was just the Franklin County Board of Elections acknowledging that the Libertarian Party could be a label on the ballot, that's when we knew we could run Joe Jorgensen and Spike Cohen in 2020 as Libertarians, because we now had the legal threshold to do so. Once we fell short on that, I believe Joe and Spike got 65,000 votes, so probably 1.5, 1.6%.
Over 70.
Over 70? Okay, great. I still beat him though, right? In your face, Spike! Okay, no, it's fine. So we fell short again in 2020, and that's, of course, puts us where we are now. What's that?
Totally hurt us.
And then, yeah, I was about to say it. That was literally my next sentence was amidst a global pandemic. Now, the nice thing is, if you look around the country about ballot access, a lot of the ballot access restrictions did get loosened, lessened, because of the signature requirements in the pandemic. So there's actually, again, the Libertarians very good at getting us on the ballot. I believe we were on the ballot in all 50 states again. And again, some of those you end up being an independent instead of Libertarian. That's just the way it goes. But we did everything we could in 2020, and that has kind of set us up to where we are now. So I want to talk just a bit about 2020 and then going forward, because there were some things that I worked on specifically that I think, again, we're talking about how do we continue to grow, how do we continue to build on the momentum from 2018, from 2020. And for me, again, not having official ballot access, being an actual recognized minor party, again, I agree with Jim's assessment and the whole XCOM and CENTCOM that local elections are key, especially in 2021. But even that is key for building up to 2022, right? So there's a couple of things. A, the HB6 scandal, the biggest bribery scandal in Ohio history, right? 5 people got charged in that. And what is fascinating for me is I've got this mask, right? Look at this, repeal HB6. It's a great mask, but then it makes my glasses fog up, so I just wear it on my chin. It's just a fun chin strap. HB6 rocked the State House. It absolutely rocked us. It is an earthquake, a political earthquake, hit the Ohio State House with HB6. And what you will see, and what I have seen, and what I'm going to continue to talk about in the year ahead, is that the players of HB6 are the same players in SB 193. Bill Seitz is the House Majority Whip. Bill Seitz, the man who was the chief sponsor, the man on the Senate floor saying it's the Wild West for ballot access in Ohio. Bill Seitz is now the Majority Whip in the Ohio House. He is Larry Householder, right hand, basically. Larry Householder will yell at you, and then Bill Seitz will come up and smack you in the face. That's how those guys work. They're so corrupt. And Bill Seitz, responsible for SB 193, was a chief sponsor of HB6. And of course, he's still in the State House. Larry Householder is no longer there, thank goodness. Matt Borges, another man who got arrested. I believe I said his name earlier, right? Matt Borges. He's the big fat sausage-looking fella who got Charlie Earl's signatures challenged. Of course, accidentally admitted to a reporter that the Ohio Republican Party put up the money and did everything, then quickly changed his statement. He had already perjured himself, but whatever, it's fine, it's Ohio. You're a Republican, you can get away with it. So Matt Borges has been charged. Matt Borges lives in my hometown. He moved to Bexley somewhere in the last 5 years, much to his own chagrin. I can talk more about that later as well. So HB6, you see this crossover. Aaron Harris, by the way, told me on the phone last summer after HB6 broke that a man named Neil Clark approached him in 2014 and offered him $10,000 cash to drop out of the race that he was running for. I believe he was running for state treasurer, whatever race Aaron Harris was in. Neil Clark, you may remember, also got charged with HB6 scandal, and instead of pleading guilty or not guilty, he wrote a book and shot himself in Florida while wearing a Mike DeWine for Governor shirt. The plot thickens with these people, huh? So, that is HB6. And what I've been working on is there is a multi-partisan alliance within the State House and around the State House now to defeat HB6. There are good principled Republicans. If you don't know, HB6 basically gave 1.5 ratepayer dollars. It's not taxpayer dollars, it's all ratepayer. It's a very strange system that we have. But basically the energy companies can get the energy committees to raise people's electric bills, and then the energy companies get that money. And it's not a tax. Larry Householder made sure that when he called Dave Yost, that this couldn't go to the Supreme Court because the ratepayer increase is not a tax. There's a whole bunch of technicalities within there, but HB6 basically raised your electric bills to bail out 2 costly, old-fashioned coal plants down one's along the Ohio River, one's in Indiana. So it doesn't make much sense. Do you live in Indiana? You don't? Okay, great. You're going to pay for it anyway. And then the 2 nuclear plants up on Lake Erie as well, and that was the big bailout. And it turns out First Energy and these coal companies, AEP, Murray Energy, over in East Ohio, were actually funneling all this money to Generation Now, Larry Householder, so they could put together a winning coalition, a majority in the State House. They literally bought all the State House seats so they could pass HB6 in 2019. And of course, this is an entirely criminal enterprise. It is bribery, it is pay to play. You are not allowed to do that. And the FBI was watching all of them the entire time. So Householder goes down, he's pleaded not guilty. Borges goes down, he's pleaded not guilty. Neil Clark kills himself, and the 2 lobbyists have already pleaded guilty, as well as Generation Now, as well as First Energy has now entered a plea deal with the feds as well. So I know, sometimes we hate the FBI, we hate the feds, but you know what? When they knocked on Matt Borges' door last July, I was pretty happy about that. So I can't believe I have to defend the FBI, but thank you, FBI, for all you do. Taking on corrupt Ohio politicians, specifically Republicans. So going forward, we have this multi-partisan alliance, Democrats in the State House that I can now message, like I was mentioning earlier, I can message them on Twitter. We retweet each other's tweets. We're working together with HB6. Now you got all these Republicans who are working against HB6, and you also have all these Republicans who hate Mike DeWine because of his pandemic emergency orders for the last year. And this is where I do think we can actually build a multi-partisan alliance to change the rules a bit. SB 193, what if, as Jeremy's saying, what if we lived in a world where all you needed was 1% or 2% in any statewide race, which is how it is in multiple other states, including Wyoming, which is another place that I worked last year on a project called the Frontier Project. Last year, I remember talking to Dustin and Ken last summer. We were grabbing dinner, and I was like, no offense to Joe Jorgensen, I just don't know if I could throw myself into that campaign the way I threw myself into Gary Johnson's campaign. But they got this weird idea over in Wyoming called the Frontier Project, and the Frontier Project was a data-driven project dedicated to making Libertarians win State House races in small places where we could win State House races. So in Wyoming, they have 100 state legislators. Am I going on too long? Oh my God, sorry, 10:50. Oh, I've been talking, but what an asshole I am. I'm so sorry.
You're a politician.
I'm a politician. I'm long-winded. I still got it done. I will be taking no questions. All right. All right, well, I will try to wrap up here in about 5 minutes. Well, actually, we're at the tail end in 2020. Frontier Project was fantastic. I thought it was very well run. I thought it was very well funded. We had 4 state house races where we ran credible Libertarians who were either elected locally or very involved locally, and we ran them against Republicans and Democrats who had no opponents for 10 years. No one had ever run against them. We have that here in Ohio too. We have Republicans. That's how they keep their supermajority. Bill Seitz has run unopposed every year for the last 8 years, that's for State House. And who knows, when he jumps back in the state Senate race, he runs unopposed again. So in Wyoming, we tried to take care of that with the Frontier Project. and we got our asses kicked on 2 races. We lost Bethany Valdez's race by 30 some votes. Still a lot of questions for the Republican county clerk, but whatever, that's fine. And then we won a race. Marshall Burt beat the Democrat, a fellow named Stan Blake. He beat Stan Blake. Stan Blake was a Democrat. He's in there for 14 years. We don't know how he was a Democrat elected in Wyoming, but Marshall Burt beat Stan Blake by 200, 300 votes, and that was the big victory. He's the first Libertarian elected to a state legislature in 30 years, everybody. So that is what I wanted to just make sure I brought here, because, you know, the whole idea of me going to a godforsaken place like Wyoming, no offense, but the Cheneys live there. It's got to be bad. The only reason I went there is because I wanted to learn how the project worked. And in Wyoming, you got 100 state legislators, 500,000 people in the state, so each legislator represents 5,000 people. Only about 3,500 of those people actually vote. So our target, when we're going door to door, we're doing data, we're doing radio advertising, we're doing mailers, when we're running actually funded races where you do all the things, where you have a good candidate who's active and who's involved in the community, and you actually have money behind them to send out leaflets every week, to send canvassers to the door every few weeks. You know, we only had to knock on like 2,000 doors. And when you divide it up between 5, 6 people and then the candidate and their team, it's very winnable. So those are the things to build on as we think about these nonpartisan races, these local races this year, and then looking into 2022, what can we do if we run as independents, you know, short of ballot access, short of actual L labels. But it's very possible to do some very good things. So, you know, that's kind of my big broad stroke of the last 10 years or so. And I want to just let everyone know that there's still a bunch of us that are still here, even after 10 years. I know it gets exhausting for people. So always, you know your limits, and but never stop fighting for liberty. And that's what we will do all together. I will now take a limited amount of questions. I believe I have 7 minutes for questions. Yes, sir. Oh, and I also, yes, I do have whiskey in my coffee. But no, I haven't been drinking. I'm talking too much.
As we approach the march toward reapportionment, which happens every 10 years.
Right, the redistricting process, which has begun this year.
And we find that in particularly overwhelmingly Republican states, we have overly ambitious Republicans who gerrymander the hell out of things, and they get struck down by the Supreme Court, who says, that's self-dealing. You can't do this because you're only helping yourself.
Right.
Well, why doesn't that work for us?
Well, it did work for us for a long time. You know, up until SB 193, when the Ohio Republican Party actually put a concerted effort into, you know, dismantling old ballot access. We used to sue and win all the time.
But they're still self-dealing.
They are still self-dealing. You're not wrong, sir. You're not wrong. In fact, that's something I often talk about with libertarians at a national level, is running libertarians for judge. You know, in Ohio, until the Republicans again get their way, because they've already lost, I think, 3 seats on the Ohio Supreme Court. The Ohio Supreme Court has been 7-0 Republican for the last, I don't know how many years. But in the last 2 cycles, 2018 and 2020, 3 Democrats have now been elected, so now it's 4-3. Now remember, the Democrats, including Jennifer Brunner, who was Secretary of State, she was very favorable to us. She was very nice, especially compared to Ken Blackwell. Now she's on the Supreme Court as well. So I think libertarians should be running for judgeships. I think if we had anyone who was qualified to run for Supreme Court, that would be a race to run in as well. But to address your actual question, yeah. I mean, they make it very, very hard. That's why I always, you know, I'll just throw out my 2 cents. I hate it when libertarians are infighting all the time. Because the real enemies are outside of this room, all right? They're not in here. We don't need to keep throwing papers at each other. When outside, they're constantly throwing papers at us, all right? So that's why I think, you know, for me, it's about, again, all we can do at this point is stay the course. We got to see how the redistricting shapes out. But once we see how it shapes out, then we can start looking at state rep races. That's what I want to do. Who's an elected local libertarian in this room right now? Raise your hand. Raise your hand if you're a locally elected libertarian. Madam Mayor! Right. Well, that's good we have 1, but now we need to have more, right? And that's what 2021 is for. Because that's what I learned at the Frontier Project in Wyoming. You have someone who's credible, like Madam Mayor, and you see that, okay, well, the county commissioners in her county have been on the same old fart Republicans that have been there for 15, 20 years. maybe it's time Madam Mayor steps up when she's ready and when the resources are there to take on a county commissioner race or even a state rep race. I mean, how huge would it be in Ohio? You know, my boy Robert Leist out there, he stepped up, he ran as a write-in against Larry Householder last year after the Householder news broke. He did get third place, a distant third place in second place. He got distant second place in Coshocton County, where he's from. And so what's he doing this year? He's running for Coshocton City Council. And he's got the new state rep's blessing. He's got the mayor's blessing. You know, there are things that we can do to continue to move up. But how crazy would it be if a Libertarian actually gets elected to the Ohio State House, right? And then then the Ohio Republicans got to face us in their own chamber. I mean, these are things that are obtainable and possible. But again, as Jim said, we have to keep building. You know, we can't just run someone for state rep right now and hope to win. It's got to be a building process. So it was a very long answer, and I don't know if I actually answered your question, which means I'm officially a politician again, which is exciting or terrible and frightening. Let me see. I have 3 more minutes. 3 more minutes. How about we just give a shout out to John Faulkner is here, everybody. Speaking of people who have been around for way too long. It's good to see you, John. You missed my speech that I talked about all the way back in 2010 when we were just young rascals. Remember those days?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, John and I would get so high. It was so fun. I'm just kidding. We would get just drunk, probably. All right, 3 minutes. I have 3 minutes for any other questions. Hearing no other questions, I don't know, what do I have, a gavel or something? I'll call this part of my speech over, and we will be back in 10 to 15 minutes with Mr. Ken Molman, I believe, who's going to talk about why affiliates matter, everybody.